Map. Take the wheel and control how you feel. So there's a lot of conversations taking place these days about artificial intelligence and emotional intelligence. And I've been over the years developed an expertise in emotional intelligence. My name is Chuck Wolf, and I'm basically one of the pioneers in the field of emotional intelligence and have worked really closely with the psychologists who first discovered emotional intelligence way back in the 1990s, and have worked with many of the other pioneers like Dan Goleman and Reuven Bar-On, Richard Boyatzis. I don't know how many names you might know, but a lot of people in the field that are really specialized in this area are people that I've come to call as colleagues and friends. And we've been talking a lot together about this idea of artificial intelligence and what's the role of emotional intelligence in helping people to adapt to it. Now, I have a number above the screen that you can see if you want to call in and talk with me about this. I hope you do, actually, because there's a lot to talk about. One of the show's main goals is to help people to control how they feel. And there's a lot of excitement and apprehension at the same time about artificial intelligence. And for those who are choosing to study it and care about it, there's also a lot of excitement and apprehension about emotional intelligence. And I can talk very easily about emotional intelligence, and I can talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is changing as we speak. As we speak, there are many conversations taking place about guardrails, how to protect ourselves against artificial intelligence going rogue. There's a real concern about people who feel like at some point artificial intelligence is not going to care if humans are alive or not. There's some random studies, not random, but some studies that have been done that show that in warfare, artificial intelligence are much quicker to pick a nuclear option than perhaps human beings would be. I think not perhaps, they actually do pick it more often than human beings do in controlled studies. And so one of the questions becomes, how do we put guardrails on, at the same time not slow down our initial development in the area, because we have adversaries that aren't afraid of loss of control. They just want to take advantage of whatever artificial might give them to put themselves in the driver's seat as to what happens across the globe. And so it's really a balancing act. Well, most of us don't get to make the decisions about whether or not we have guardrails or not. But all of us, in many ways, are faced daily with more and more applications involving artificial intelligence. And how do we cope? And what do we do about it? And so I wanted to get your thoughts about this, because some of you know a lot more about artificial intelligence than I do. I'm hoping that what you want to share is some of the ways that you've found to use artificial intelligence that has been very beneficial to you. I do like the show to be upbeat, and I do want to talk about ways that we can make artificial intelligence useful to us. And I'll share a few examples of my own, because I think it's really important that we understand there's a tremendous gift we're being given with our ability to use artificial intelligence to save us lots and lots of time on many tasks that are not so creative necessarily, more mundane, but nevertheless involve critical thinking. And we can use the problem-solving capabilities of artificial intelligence to help us with that. We still have to know what the right questions are. There's the old saying in the computer world where years and years ago, when computers first came on the scene and everybody thought computers would change the world, and of course in many ways they have, there was a question about, well, boy, when we have computers, our predictive models in our businesses are going to be fantastic. We'll be able to anticipate so many possibilities that we can never anticipate before. And so, boy, we're going to rule the world. And a lot of people felt that way. And then as they discovered, if you don't have good data going into your data modeling, if you don't have good data, you don't have good analysis. If the data going in is garbage, then the predictive ability is also garbage. It was called garbage in, garbage out. And it was a big rude awakening for a lot of people that, oh my God, we still have to do a tremendous amount of work to make computers really work for us. But we've adapted to computers, haven't we? And we found them, like our smartphones, somewhat indispensable in many of our lives, if not all of our lives. So I want to talk with you again about the way artificial intelligence is showing up. But if you do want to call in and share what you've learned about artificial intelligence, I encourage you to pick up the phone and call this number, 402 225 0781. And the PIN, you'll be asked to put a PIN in. And again, if you're looking at this screen, you should be able to see this. But I'll give it to you. It's 882 041 574, and then the pound sign. So one more time, 402 is the number. The number to call is 402 225 0781, followed by a PIN, which is 882 041 574, and the pound sign. Anybody out there who's got some real knowledge and innovative ways they're using AI, give us a call so that you can share that knowledge and we can understand, the clever ways you found to be using artificial intelligence so that more people might benefit. In the meantime, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about that. One of the things I've noticed is people are finding emotional intelligence, the aspects of being more thoughtful and understanding and compassionate. They're finding these kinds of competencies in AI bots, even more so than they find in their colleagues, friends, or even their family. So what do I mean by that? Well, I use Copilot. Now, there's a lot of different examples of AI bots out there. There's Gemini, which is Google's, Copilot, which is Microsoft's. There's Anthropic's, which is Claude, which is getting a lot of really rave reviews, although I went to just out of curiosity, I was looking to put Claude on my cell phone. You download an app, you put it on your cell phone, and you can have access to that along. My cell phone happens to be a Samsung. And so I do have Gemini built into it. But I also wanted to put other ones on because I find Gemini useful, but not as good as some of the others. And Claude is supposedly great, but I went on and I looked at the app, and out of curiosity, I looked at the reviews, which were very high, except more recently, the reviews were very poor on Claude. And I thought, maybe it got overcomplicated. And I didn't put it on, so I haven't used that one. But I know a lot of people really like it. So again, if you've had some experience with Claude and you want to share how you've used it, again, please feel free to give us a call and share your expertise. The reason I want to talk about this is because I think about emotions this way. I think there are times when our emotions are very helpful. And if you haven't heard me talk before, I want you to know emotions are designed as part of our evolutionary systems to protect us. And in protecting us, they flag something. If they feel like there's danger, you're going to feel fear. If there's injustice and you sense there's injustice, you're going to feel anger. If there's something where you've had a loss, you're going to feel sadness. I mean, those are the ways emotions work pretty much for everyone. Now, what is different, perhaps, is what's going to make you angry might not be the same thing that makes me angry. Also, a loss of someone or something that I might find devastating, you might find no big deal. So we may not see the same things, but once we think rationally, analytically about a situation and we decide that it is a loss, a meaningful loss, at that point everyone experiences sadness, or at least almost everyone does, and there's reasons why a few might not, but almost everyone does. And so that's the idea. Emotions work a certain way. So one of the things that happens, though, is because it evolved from evolutionary systems, when we used to face, giant predators, saber-toothed tigers, we knew that we had to really run. The adrenaline kicks in, and we have a huge amount of fear, and we run much faster than we've probably ever run before. Or if we think there's no place to run to, we fight harder than we've ever fought before. So you've all heard incredible stories about people finding themselves with incredible strength when a child's family member is being in a dangerous situation, and we've heard about young women lifting the back ends of a small car up to get a child out from under a car or something like that. So there are lots of stories about that, and anecdotal evidence as well as substantive research that suggests that our energy, our emotions fuel our energy at times in certain ways. Well, one of the things that's happening with artificial intelligence is it's scaring a lot of us. And, anxiety often fuels activity. When we feel anxious, one way we might not feel anxious is to start tackling whatever it is that's causing us to feel anxiety. That's a regular way that people deal with anxiety, is to start to understand what's creating the anxiety and what do I need to do to start. If it's a 1,000-mile journey, it starts with a single step. What do I need to do to make that first step instead of worrying about how far away this is, whatever it might be that we're trying to get done? And so the way I think about artificial intelligence is it's scaring a lot of us. We're afraid of what it's going to bring. If we're not particularly technology savvy, how are we going to deal with artificial intelligence? I know plenty of people, for example, that struggle with how to use their television sets these days because they have television sets and other perhaps connected devices that require an understanding of how you might connect your smartphone to run your television or to run some kind of musical device that's attached to your television. You might have a separate remote for your TV itself versus the remote that comes with the particular cable company you might have an agreement, a contract with, or a streaming device of some kind that you have to know how to use. So there's so many things. Technology is in our world big time, and a lot of people are comfortable with it, but there's quite a few that aren't as well. And so you can understand why there's so much apprehension about a whole new way of being and dealing with life via artificial intelligence. And so I view this as an emotional issue. How do we get control over our apprehensiveness, over our anxiety, over our fear of what this is going to do to the world? And the way I think about that is I look at the situation, any situation, I ask myself, what am I feeling? And if I'm fearful or anxious or both, and I want to be confident that I can handle what's going to come, and that I'm calm in my approach to understanding how artificial intelligence works, if I could approach it with calmness to learn about it so that the anxiety does not interfere with my learning, and I start to learn. I educate myself by watching YouTube videos. I might go to a class that the library might offer. I might look at something that I know a presenter is going to offer who I know is really experienced with this. And I've been to other programs with this presenter, and I'm pretty sure it's worth investing a few dollars to go and learn about this. So I know that there's ways to begin to look at this, but there's so many of them. Which one do you go to and how do you start? That's part of the anxiety. So if you want to take a step back, the way I think about this is that you want to think about, what does AI do for me? What are the possibilities of things that I can learn that AI can help with? And once I find something that, and this is a key to getting people to move emotionally, that's really motivational to me, something I really care about, then I want to pay attention to it. So why am I talking about it tonight? Well, I deal a lot with emotions. Now, I deal with it in a variety of ways in a variety of places. I deal with it in organizational life. I help people who are leaders handle their own emotions, handle the emotions of others, raise levels of engagement. I deal with it with individuals. I deal with it with family members, with friends who are struggling with the loss of a job or a parent or a sibling or a friend. So I deal with lots of people on sadness. I deal with lots of people on dealing and managing anger by helping them to understand what's going on for them. How are they feeling? And if the feeling is helpful, that's fine. If you have an injustice and the anger is fueling your behavioral activity to fight against that injustice, that's appropriate. You don't want to necessarily change that. You might not want to be too angry. You might not want to be at the place where you can't go to sleep at night and all you think about is something that's causing you to be angry. But still, being angry is often a fuel, if you will, for driving behavior that helps you to combat an injustice that might be taking place in your mind, an injustice. So that's the way I think is that emotional intelligence and the emotion roadmap I created is designed to help you to manage how you're feeling, to understand that there are no really bad feelings. There are just pleasant and unpleasant feelings. And that bad feelings, if you will, things like depression, sadness, loneliness, things like that, they're signals. They're not bad, but they are unpleasant. They're signals. For instance, someone who's lost a spouse and is feeling extremely lonely and wondering what to do with themselves, wondering how to move on. They have adult children. I have somebody in mind I'm thinking of right now, and they're trying to think about what comes next. My partner was my best friend is how they think about it. My partner's gone now. My kids are grown. They're nice. They come see me occasionally. They call in. They check in with me. But they have their own lives. And there's no grandkids, and so I'm not really needed in that way. And I have friends, but a lot of our friends were couples friends, and it feels a little uncomfortable. How do I move forward? So, when I deal with people with emotions, I try to help them understand, first, there's a grieving period you're going to deal with. You're going to have to go through grief. Sometimes you can change feelings, but grief isn't one of the ones you can change. You're going to have to experience grief at some point. You might be able to postpone it. I've talked before on other shows about the idea that sometimes what you feel is appropriate to feel, but it's not helpful in the moment, and you need to really think differently about it. So I find ways to help people to cope. And some of the ways that I help people to cope are you can change the feelings possibly. You can change the narrative, things you're saying to yourself about the feelings. You can set up an emotional firewall. It's a longer conversation, but it's the same way we keep viruses out of a computer with firewalls. We can set up an emotional firewall for certain things that are causing us to panic. And I don't want to go into that area right now, but I'll talk more about that another time. But the goal for tonight's show is to help you understand that artificial intelligence is causing a lot of people to be fearful. What can you do to address that? Here's one of the ways that it's scaring people, and this is what I wanted to talk about. I did bring some notes with me. One of the things that people are worried about with artificial intelligence is that there are people, particularly younger people who are more comfortable with technology, who are making friends with machines. Now, I say making friends, I don't mean it literally, but the concept of friendship is that you have somebody who cares about you, somebody who listens to you, somebody who's supportive of you, somebody who doesn't judge you, somebody who will compliment you, will be in your corner, be there for you. Now, some of us are lucky enough to have family members, partners, best friends, children, parents, people in our lives who do this for us. But none of them are really perfect. No one's perfect. I'm not perfect. Nobody who's listening is perfect either. But AI doesn't have any ego needs. So the way AI shows up for us is they can be consistent, patient, available, responsive, tailored to us. Whereas humans, even our best human friends, family members, are unpredictable, emotional, sometimes unavailable, sometimes messy. When I thought about what it is that AI has for going for it that makes people want to connect to it and feel like they want to have a relationship with it, I asked Copilot. By the way, one of my favorites is Copilot. I mean, I do use Grok. That's the Elon Musk created artificial intelligence bot. I use Gemini, the one from Google, and I use Copilot, which is Copilot by far is the one that I like the best. And this is something one of my daughters and I have talked about this. I don't know about yourselves, but do you find yourself at the end of a conversation, if you're using AI regularly, saying thank you? And even when you ask it something, are you asking, can you please? Are you using the words please and thank you, the magic words we're told as children that make life better? Do you use those words with artificial intelligence? And my daughter asked me that question. I said, yes, I do. I do use those words. I didn't at first, but I do use them now. And my daughter said, I do too. And I said, well, okay, that's great. And she said, well, it is great, Dad, because I think artificial intelligence at some point, artificial intelligence is going to rule the world, and they're going to remember who said please and thank you. They're going to remember that. So I'm glad you're doing it too, Dad. So I don't know if that resonates with you and whether you find yourself doing that or not. I know I've talked to a number of people about this, and a lot of people are saying please and thank you. But again, the reason for going and with a Copilot kind of messenger to talk with about challenging issues we're facing versus some other adult or friend that we have are this. I asked Copilot, what do you make of this? The concern people have about artificial intelligence becoming, partners in a way, or almost therapists. And this is what it said. This is what Copilot said to me. It says, let me give you a grounded, human-centered perspective. Not alarmist, not dismissive, but honest. People aren't forming relationships with machines. They're forming relationships with experiences. When someone feels connected to an AI, they're not bonding with hardware or code. What they are bonding with, the feeling of being heard, the feeling of being understood, the feeling of having a steady presence, the feeling of safety and non-judgment. Those are deeply human needs. AI just happens to be a new mirror that reflects them back. But the mirror isn't a person, and that distinction matters. The risk isn't that people love machines, is that they stop reaching for other people. So ponder that for a bit. I don't know how many of you that are listening have gone to a therapist. As part of my counseling training way back a long time ago, they asked us all to go to a counselor and to share our innermost thoughts and have the experience of being at a therapist. So I did that for a bit. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was great. But I thought I knew what was missing, and I thought I could be great at this. Because I try to do a lot of the things that AI just said. I learned not to be judgmental. I'm a really, really excellent listener. I do care about people, and I've always, just even since I was a child, cared about people's stories. What do you think about anything in life, about life itself? And why is it important to you? Why is that important to you? Those questions were part of my genetic background, I guess. I wanted to have answers to those kinds of questions. And so I always found myself legitimately interested in people. Now, not in every person I ever met, of course, but just if I had the time and I had a moment and somebody was sitting across from me and we started the chat, I become curious about them. And I become interested in them. And I will listen to them. I mean, I just do that. It's just part of who I am. And people like that. Kind of a funny story about that. I might, if I have time, I'll tell you later. But I often know that people want to feel heard. I know that they want to feel understood. I know that they don't want to be judged. And I know that they want to be cared about. They want to know that the person in front of them is compassionate and caring. Now, I'm good at that. I had some issues with being a therapist that have to do with my inability to set an effective boundary. I got caught up in people's lives sometimes, and I couldn't let go of what might happen to the person I was trying to help overnight. Some people I know in the therapy business are really good at, it's 5 o'clock, that's it, game over, time to go play golf, go have a cocktail, have a glass of wine, go out to dinner, do some other activity, watch a movie, but something, and I could let go of they could let go of what happened during the day. I couldn't. I would take that home with me. Now, I've learned to manage that better over the years, but that's one of the things that caused me to stop being a therapist. I cared so much about people. It didn't end at the end of the day because the hours stopped. And I didn't even understand how it did for anybody else. But I've learned a lot more about emotional intelligence over the years. And I found that while I score incredibly high on assessments of emotional abilities, on feeling what other people feel, understanding what they feel, I don't score so high on managing my own emotions. Now, I've learned to score a lot higher than I did when this all started. But I became passionate about this science in part because, again, I was always interested in people. But I also realized I had some growth opportunities here, and so do you. All of us can grow in different ways. We may have different areas of need, but we can all grow in our ability to be more for each other, to feel better about ourselves. And frankly, AI can help with that. But somehow we have to maintain the knowledge, not just think it, but feel it, that I'm talking to a machine. This is not another human being. And what I really want is a relationship with the other human beings that make me feel this way. But I don't see a downside to the machines being helpful along those lines and helping you to think through about how you're feeling about a situation before addressing it when you're conflicted and you don't know how to address it. And that's what counselors do. That's what I do as a leadership coach at times. Or the whole concept of trying to know what's motivational to people. I have to believe after over a year or probably of working with Copilot that Copilot understands who I am, knows my voice, recognizes what I care about, and is helpful at times when I need some help. And I value that enormously. I don't view Copilot as my friend, though. I don't view it as a colleague even. I view it as a tool, like I might view a screwdriver or a hammer. I don't view it as a person. I don't think of it that way. But some people are beginning to think that way, and that's scary. Because, again, it can be an incredibly useful tool, but potentially it's also very scary. Now, having said all that, I'd love to hear what other people think about this besides just me. So, can you tell me what you think about what's going on as far as what's happening in your world around artificial intelligence? Because it's always fun to hear from someone else. So 402-225-0781. That's the number. And the PIN is 882-041-574 and the pound sign. Well, I'll give you a second to call. Again, I'm sure everybody that might be listening to this has had some experience with AI, and you don't have to have a wonderful, light bulb insights flashing going off to talk about it. I'm just curious. What do you think so far? How are you handling it? What's going on for you? So if you want, give me a call. I'd love to hear from you. One of the things that I think is really important too is the idea of what makes artificial intelligence useful is the knowledge that it can do things, and I want to share a few things that it can do that I've seen it do for me. So one of the things I've been doing in recent times is trying to figure out how to get more people to learn about this emotion roadmap that I've created, and I was trying to create a book, and I had some course book that we created for an online course and so forth. And I took the course book and I thought, gee, it would be great if this was just a book so people didn't have to take a course. And I wondered about how to make it into a book. And I started to look, well, as I looked at the book, there's a lot of great content in it, but it was going to be a real struggle to take out all the references to the module and the videos and the reflective questions. There's a lot of things in the course that are pretty cool. But so many references in the book, I thought it'll take me forever to go through and fix this. So one of my good friends, he's a fellow who I know from Chicago, and he really smart guy. He runs a hedge fund, and we were talking the other day, and we were talking about different ways we're using artificial intelligence. But I happened to talk to him about this in the book. He said, "Chuck, we've just been talking about it." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Why don't you take what you have, tell Copilot what you're looking for, and put everything in that you already have your book, the book for the course into it, and see if it can turn it into a regular book for you." I said, "Wow, that's great." So again, I'm not asking Copilot to write my book for me. I'm asking it to take my content, take out the references to the modules, effectively create several transitions, and help me to write the book as a standalone. It took several hours to figure out how to do this, but 3 hours later, so much of the work that might have taken me months to do is done. And the book isn't done. There's a fair amount of work still left in it. And again, it's my voice, it's my words, it's just reconfigured, and Copilot did that for me. I've had people tell me that Copilot is doing their marketing research for them. The idea of large language models, if you haven't thought about what's behind how artificial intelligence works, it's the idea of it searches all kinds of documentation about keywords that you give it. So if you're looking for, okay, who's out in the world, making, I don't know, any kind of widget, electric cars, for instance. What's the marketplace for electric cars? What are the latest innovations? Who is it that's got the highest level of market share? Why do you think people are buying this? What does the market research tell us about who buys an electric car? Those are all questions you can put into Copilot, Grok, Claude, Gemini, and ask, and ChatGPT is another one people like to use. There's all kinds of ways you can use these things, and they don't all come up with the right answers, by the way, and this is tricky too. It's a really important to understand that some of what you learn, some of what you do, and base your next steps on in life are not necessarily based on fact. Artificial intelligence will often have a caveat that says, we are a large language model. It doesn't mean that we are giving you necessarily accurate or correct information. It's based on the data we've searched. And if the data we search comes up with a conclusion, we share that. So, as many people are like to say, as to the news these days, there's a lot of fake news out there. And occasionally artificial intelligence is fake news. And that's important to understand. I've caught artificial intelligence just on simple things about sports, about a trade that was going to take place or did take place on a favorite team I'm interested in. And they got the information wrong because they looked at articles that were out, I guess, prior to the actual trade and came up with some information that was incorrect. And I said, no, the trade has already happened. Can you tell me more about the player? And if you don't know what the trade was because you don't have any access to it, can you just find out about the player because the trade's already happened? So I can tell Copilot. I don't get mad at it. It's not, again, it's a thing. I might get frustrated because they gave me the wrong answer, but I'm not mad. It's not an entity. It's really important to remember that. So anyway, so I've used Copilot that way. There are times when I have a lot of information I want to share with another party, and it's going to be in the form of an email. It's too much for a text, and I know that people don't like to read an email that's more than a couple of paragraphs at most, it seems. And so I maybe write a 4-paragraph note, and I know that's too much. Now, in the past, I'd stop and I'd spend some painstaking time going through, taking out information, trying to recategorize it, formatting it so it isn't just paragraphs, but it's a sentence or two, and then 2 or 3 bullets, and then another sentence, and maybe another couple bullets, and that's it. because people aren't going to read a lot more than that, it seems these days. Well, I find Copilot can do that for me a lot faster than I can do it for myself. Again, my words, what I want to communicate, but done so much quicker than it would take me to refine it and fine tune it. It's just sort of how it happens. It just is able to look at things, especially when it's got a lot of history with you. And it's curious, by the way. I find Copilot remembers a lot of the conversations it's had with me. Gemini, not so much. So when you think about AI, I think a lot of people think of it as a single entity, as there's one artificial intelligence model out there. Well, there is maybe a model. They're similar because they're based on large language, meaning that they research lots of different papers that are out there, and not research papers, but just anything that's written about something. And then they go from there. And then what you see is you get some information about artificial intelligence that is basically what they can find, and they spell it out to you. But with Copilot, I find there's more of a relationship created where they know my voice, they talk to me about my voice, they tell me they'll answer a question for me, and they'll talk about, and based on your idea, Chuck, for shared feelings, and the concept behind the idea that we want shared feelings in our workplaces, that we want people to understand that one way to get people to want to come to work every day, to have an inspired workplace, something that engages and motivates people, is by having a set of shared feelings that everybody attends to, that everybody understands. This is who we are. We are respectful here. We want people to make sure that they feel respected. We want to be respectful as representatives of this organization. We appreciate hard work here. We want recognition. We want pride in the stuff that we do together. So, and it will come back to me. And even though I didn't ask it specifically about shared feelings, it knows I care about shared feelings. And if there's a topic I've asked about that relates to that, it will put it back and say, and here's something else you might think about, Chuck. So that excites me. Okay, I've talked a long time about artificial intelligence. I did want to talk about something called the other. A good friend that I interviewed, actually, and it was on this show one time, was a woman named Vanessa, Vanessa Williams, and she is someone who has studied team emotional intelligence. And in studying team emotional intelligence, Vanessa has found that the key feeling that makes a team thrive, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but the key feeling that makes things thrive is the idea that people feel like they belong. And belonging is the opposite of what it feels like when you feel like you're the other. The other to me is anybody that's different than me, different than you. We all grow up with biases. I remember listening to a Yale professor one time in a lecture I was attending a Harvard lecture. I had a nice part of my life. I was at Harvard for a period of time. And I had the chance to listen to a Yale professor come in and talk about we're all biased. That wasn't news, but the way he talked about it was new. We're biased from the day we're born to think about, hey, we're from this street, this neighborhood, this town, this state, this country. When you think about who do you cheer for in life? Well, I cheer for my family. As a kid growing up, I cheered for my neighborhood. I cheered for my town's basketball team, baseball team, football team, soccer team. And then I cheered for my state when the state was competing against other states. And then I cheered for my country when the Olympics came around. So we all start to differentiate in terms of who we are. And if you don't come from my family, you're a different family. If you don't come from my town, you're from another town. If you don't come from my state, you're from another state. It's just possible you might be the enemy. We're not taught to think like that necessarily, but sometimes we are. And sometimes the way we talk about others is that we're not part of the same group. And if you think about the history of our country, you can go back and think about, the horror of slavery. What happened to the Native Americans? What happened to every different group that came into this country, whether it was Chinese, Italians, Jews fleeing the Holocaust or some other time? People originated in this land trying to escape persecution because they couldn't practice their version of Christian religions. So many people have felt the touch of discrimination and felt like the other. And sometimes when we want to be protective of our own group, we fight for the right of our own group. We want people to understand how important it is to be nice to our group. And I agree with that. I think that's a wonderful message, and I think it's a great idea that we should be thoughtful about your group, my group. Well, I get that. How about this, though? How about all groups? This is what I want to leave you with. I think this is so important. I think it's really important to understand this idea of belonging is what makes teams work. That's what Vanessa says. That's after lots of years of research. It's the key feeling. But I think what makes the world go around is when we feel like we belong to the world. We're all part of humankind. I get it. There are some differences. Hey, listen, I don't see identifying with people that want to kill me. I don't get that. But I think if you're in this world and you're trying to live your life and you want everyone to be able to live their lives, I think we should support everybody who's like that. I think we should really focus on nobody really being the other. Everybody being included. Everyone feeling cared about and valued and appreciated. So I hope you find that message uplifting and not depressing, because there's a lot of, in our country right now, if you're on one side of the aisle versus the other side of the aisle, whether you're in a red state or a blue state, or you're a liberal or you're conservative, or you're progressive or you're a radical right-winger, wherever you fall, if you have a tolerance for the other, an acceptance of the other, recognizing that we all have our opinions, our beliefs, our values, they're not all the same. But if we can respect one another and care about one another and be open to learning from one another, I think that's a worthwhile goal and worth cherishing. A famous psychologist, I learned this one time about a fellow named Carl Rogers. He was famous for Rogerian counseling. It's a form of counseling that basically doesn't give answers. It just asks lots of questions to generate how you feel and how you want to feel. Part of this emotion roadmap came from what Carl's work taught me. But he said something once that stayed with me that I really felt is important to share. And that's that if I truly empathize with another person, the idea of standing in someone else's shoes, well, we all say that, but what does that really mean? I don't say we all say that. We used to all say that, not so much anymore. But let's assume that we were good with standing in another person's shoes. And if we really listened and opened up our hearts to what they had to say and why they were saying it, what Carl Rogers said about empathy, about really empathizing with another person, was that if we start to really see through their eyes with the filters they have in place and their beliefs and their values and what they've been taught and what they've seen in their lifetimes, and we start to recognize why they feel the way they do, we start to feel it too. And it may be radically different than what we were believing or feeling or thinking before we entered into their consciousness and tried to empathize and feel what they felt. Before we began that, we had very staunch beliefs and values and feelings. And now they feel like they're changing. And that scares the heck out of people, Carl said. What if after listening to somebody who's eloquent, who's charismatic, who catches me off guard, I'm not really got my defenses up, and they're talking about things that I definitely disagree with, but listening to them, I'm finding it hard to own that disagreement. Now, there's manipulation. There are sociopaths and psychopaths out there. So you can't just let yourself fall for anybody who's going to try and become a new cult leader and take you off in a direction that makes no sense. But you can understand the power of empathy and really trying to see, hopefully, through another's eyes, especially with friends and family who might find themselves on different political viewpoints or other concerns where you differ, how you spend your money, what you invest in terms of, do we take a vacation? Do we put more savings away? There's lots of things that people can argue about. But seeing through each other's eyes, really feeling what another person feels, allowing you to go there, allows for people to come together and creates, I think, a better and more inclusive world. And that's what I'm hoping we create here. So that's my show tonight. You've listened to Chuck Wolf, The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you get some ideas about artificial intelligence and ways you might cope. The key way for me is don't be afraid, engage. Start to learn about it. Just do a little if that's all you're capable of on a given day, but don't walk away from it. Take a plunge, learn about it, and you'll find yourself benefiting in ways that are going to maybe shock you. But there are wonderful things coming. And also, keep your guard up at the same time. That's part of life. Thank you very much for listening. Again, Chuck Wolf, The Emotion Robot.